I hereby introduce to you Mr. Michael Veazey.
Today's show is brought to you by Amazing FBA's mentoring program. So I'm kind of sponsoring my own show. I just wanted to briefly tell you about the mentoring program because it's about to go away at its current price point and in its current form. The mentoring program is there very simply to get you launched, like pretty much everything I do for the more, early days sellers, apart from the 10K Collective, which is obviously for people doing very, very well and ambitious to scale. Everything else I do is really geared to helping you get launched with your first private label product within probably 6 months, maybe 9 months if you're really busy and have other projects on the go. So if you want to work with me for £300 a month, for 2 90-minute sessions plus email support, that is the current offer. I'm going to take one more person on, maximum 2 if the other candidate is really, really special and looks like a really great person who's going to succeed. Either that or by the end of June, one of those, whichever comes first. Then after that, I'm going to yank the mentoring program at that price point. And when it goes back up, it's going to be part of a bigger, more powerful package, including an online course, which I'm very excited about. And it's going to be at least £500 a month, probably more, because I'm putting a higher value on my time because I realize opportunity cost is a real cost. And hopefully you realize that as well. So if you value your time, there are 3 things you need to have to even apply for mentoring. You need at least £5,000 in inventory money. That's not to cover your training costs with me. That's additional, but just for inventory, 20 hours a week to devote to building a business, and 6 months of your time to devote to it as well. Otherwise, I think you're just wasting your time, and I won't take you on because I don't want to take your money for the sake of it. I want to take your money only in exchange for great value and you creating your business finally getting off the ground. So amazingfba.com/mentoring if that interests you. Otherwise, on with the show. Thanks for listening. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show today. I'm delighted to welcome a very big figure in the Amazon space, and that person is Matt Ward, famously of FBA All-Stars podcast, a very well-known, well-liked and respected podcast in the Amazon space, and also the founder and CEO of Call, which is all about Amazon funding, which we'll be getting into the next episode, as well as many, many things, just basically a serial entrepreneur and, of course, an Amazon seller himself. So, Matt, many, many good things to offer us, so welcome to the show.
I would say serial ADD. I don't know about a big name. And just to clarify, not CEO of Coral. I'm part of the founding team focused on growth. But basically what we're doing is we're funding the 99% of businesses that VCs won't touch. And most people have dealt with banks and realized that banks are bullshit. But anyways, continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're totally right there. I remember there's a lot of discussions in the 10K Collective, which is a mastermind I run, that's got people selling probably between about 25 and 250K a month, roughly in dollar terms, or possibly a bit more in dollar terms, actually. And yeah, one of the topics that comes up repeatedly is how on earth do you fund growth, because it's such a capital hungry business. And the bigger you grow and the more successful you are, the more that's a problem. So you're absolutely right. And the fact that banks seem to not want to touch e-commerce, even though they're happy to put money into brick and mortar stores, which are famously losing money and shrinking market share, is a whole other topic, which we will definitely address, but that's for the next episode. So this one, Matt, we want to focus really on your background as an Amazon seller, and you've sold an Amazon business now, which is something that many of us only dream of, and many others dream of even starting one. So it's fantastic to have you on. So just give us, first of all, the sort of, if you like, the Cliff Notes version of yourself in a nutshell, where you came from, how you got into Amazon.
Basically, I built and sold 3 companies. One mattered. The one that mattered was the Amazon one. Before Amazon, I was in crowdfunding. My background's engineering. I found out fast there's no freaking way I'm working for someone. I got into crowdfunding very early on. I was helping Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns. I built the top crowdfunding podcast out of the Kickstart, only to find out helping people raise money they don't have shit to pay you with. So there's no business model there. I knew people that were doing Amazon. I went to China. I was actually working on creating a laptop case that opened up into a stand desk. And while I was doing that, I knew some people doing Amazon. They were doing pretty well with it. And I figured if these dummies can do it, I can probably pull it off as well. I decided to try it out. And one thing led to another. It just kind of started to take off. I had the podcast FBA All-Stars, which was 2 things. I was decently good at talking, but it was more that I was good and had experience running an Amazon business. And I figured if I share what I'm doing, hopefully I can be helpful, and maybe I can make a little bit of money so that I can cash flow myself and put 100% of the money back into the business.
Excellent. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's quite a background. So I guess we'd unpick that a little bit. So first of all, there's a lot of people with an engineering background, perhaps unsurprisingly in Amazon. I mean, I know Greg Mercer, famously, he's in the sort of, as well as Amazon seller in the sort of software space, and also becoming a bit of an influencer because of that, I guess, these days as well. Well, I say a bit of an influencer, quite a major influencer in that space. So how do you think engineering helped feed into, if you think it is at all, how do you help you with your Amazon business?
I mean, I went to a tough school. I went to Georgia Tech, so it was one of the top engineering schools. I don't think necessarily it helped. I think it more taught you how to deal with a bunch of shit to solve different problems. And my favorite classes were always the ones where we had a problem and had to suddenly find some way to build it. So we built a robot and did some other stuff for competitions. But I think it would more come down to the fact that engineers are people that want to build stuff and then realize when they go to work for someone, they're not actually building much, but they're typically relatively smart and driven. So that would be I guess, why you see a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the building urge is interesting. I just interviewed a member of the 10K Collective for the podcast. He's earlier in his Amazon journey than you, but he's done pretty well from a standing start with no external funding. He's built, I think he did 120K in turnover last December from nothing. So again, another smart engineering person. And you're right. I think engineers have that construction urge. And then, of course, office politics means that you're spending your life managing other people and managing politics, right, rather than building stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. And plus, yeah, as you say, they're smart problem solvers, which makes a lot of sense as well for entrepreneurs. So tell us a bit more about the crowdfunding thing. Again, was that relevant to your Amazon journey, do you think? Was that part of what got you started with an Amazon business with some success?
I mean, I learned from that. I learned, I would say, copywriting and sales, basically strategies to be good at sales and marketing, which I took into my Amazon business. I wrote a book, the Amazon Copywriting Bible. You can't really call it a book. It's more like a long guide on how to write listings. But I would say it was primarily just in terms of learning the copy and sales side of things, which if you could win at that, at least early on in the Amazon days, you could do pretty well. And if you were strong with giveaways and some other strategies, then that was very effective. Okay,
so you feel like you say early on in the Amazon days, so you're implying that the copywriting skills are less crucial these days, is that right?
Yeah, it's less important. I mean, I would say it matters, but it doesn't matter to a huge degree. If you're converting better than someone else, you're going to rank higher than them over time, because the only thing Amazon cares about is making money and making consumers happy, i.e. spending more money. They don't really care about Amazon sellers in any way, shape, or form. So you need to focus on how you can make them more money. But that said, even if you have great copywriting, if you're going against someone who's selling it at major losses just to kick your ass, then you're going to find yourself in trouble.
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, people do sometimes, I think, put an almost sort of religious faith in the ability of copy to sell just about anything. And I think they forget that Amazon is driven by price as much as anything else. I mean, okay, it's not eBay. You don't have the really cheapskate, nasty sellers that push people like Will Turner and his brother to just shut down an apparently successful eBay business because of that. But on the other hand, it is one of the things that Jeff Bezos talks about, right? Is lower prices, quicker delivery, greater selection, and the greater selection and lower prices don't work in our favor as sellers, right? So it's a very good reminder not to place too much faith in copy. So then, yeah, you saw other people getting into it and you thought, well, if they can do it, I can as well. I mean, what was it about them that you thought you could improve on, or what was it that finally kicked you into the Amazon game?
I realized they were average and I would work harder, and they were successful. So that was enough to try. Then I got into it. I looked into Jungle Scout. I listened to every one of the podcasts out there, every episode. I'm always been of the opinion, podcasts have been very valuable for me. I've always been of the opinion, when you want to do something, find the smartest people that are doing it and learn as much as possible from them. A lot of that for me has been finding the best podcast and listening to every fucking episode at like 2 or 3x speed, just so that you can pull in all of that information and then be able to distill that and create the winning strategies and plans to build something better. Or to do something different.
I'm glad to find somebody else that listens to things at 2 times speed. I find that it's a bit too much. I tend to listen to things at 1.5 speed because I want the information, but I want it fast. So I'm glad I'm not alone in that. I thought that was a bit of an odd behavior that I had. So thanks for reassuring me.
1.5 is pretty slow. If you just consistently go up by 10% each time. I mean, I have some that I'm doing like 3.5, and it just depends on the podcast and how the speaker is, but you get the information. You would be surprised how strong the brain is for processing information if you're willing to focus. And I don't think you need 100% focus on the information. I think a lot of it is also just having having valuable things around you so that you are picking up on things subconsciously.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess it's a kind of thing of having a valuable environment around you. And I suppose a podcast can kind of be that, particularly as you can do it. When in my case, I do it when I'm washing up, when I'm running. Sometimes if I don't have to drive very much, fortunately, because I mostly work from home because I do Amazon stuff and the podcast. But yeah, when I have to travel, it can be done then as well. And I guess, yeah, those are perfect environments to sort of soak your brain in something when you're not really having to think about other things. So interesting point. So tell us a bit more about your Amazon business. So you got started basically because it sounded like you had some pretty powerful backgrounds. So engineering, as you said, pretty driven, numbers focused, problem solving, smart driven, kind of generally personally like building stuff. That makes sense. The crowdfunding gave you the idea that you're confident with copywriting. And then obviously you saw some other people and you thought, I can do better than that because they're succeeding and I'm smarter than that. So lots of podcasts. What was the next stage in your journey?
I got some samples. I was living in China at the time. I've been living throughout Southeast Asia at this time, doing the digital nomad thing. I went to China for the standing desk I designed, and I was working with a factory there. And it just turned out I'd give them a design, and then it would be like 3 weeks to get a prototype. And I was relatively impatient, and I was in a very, very Chinese part of a very, very Chinese city, Hangzhou. So I would walk by, and people would run to the window kind of deal. So there wasn't really anyone to talk to either. So I was just very focused on that. I was actually living with someone who was a sourcing agent, so he was able to help me a bit on looking at products and finding things. I'd been working with Alibaba up to this point and eventually settled on a product, had a line that we were focused on doing. It was all in the outdoor type space and launched a product. I think I put $8,000 initially into the investment of initial just one product. I remember I had a friend, he had gone through the ASM course. I feel like I torrented it or something. It wasn't really all that valuable. It's way overpriced and oversold. But I mean, there were some valuable nuggets. But the one thing that was really valuable for me was he said, be able to buy at least 2,000 units, which was completely counter to what most people were saying. I know Will Charnlin and other people say, just get a small amount and test it. In my opinion, that's terrible because you need to have enough firepower where if you actually are successful, you don't run out immediately and lose all the steam. So by having 2,000, I was able to push fast, drive the sales up, and the product it just took off. Things went really well. That funded products 2, 3, and 4, and then it just kind of became a cycle. 1 and 4 were big hits. 2, okay. 3, solid. 5, But that's kind of how it was. Is I just went fast. I'd been doing the podcast at this point. I'd been pushing the envelope. I did a lot of white hat or gray hat type stuff. So product reviews, giveaways, etc. I think I ruined it for everyone because I talked about it in the podcast, and then it got very popular. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, there's in a way a lot to take on board there. But I mean, the first thing to say, yeah, ASM. I have to confess that I try not to mention too many specific names in the podcast because I kind of don't want to give them the oxygen of the publicity, even adverts. But yeah, I went through ASM, and I thought it was overpriced. And the fact that I didn't even, when I went through ASM 3, even really touch on sourcing from China, which for most of us by far the most challenging part, I thought was truly dreadful. I don't know how else to put it really, but without swearing. But yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Find a Chinese sourcing agent.
Okay, now that's one of the things I was going to pick up.
That's one of my big hacks. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Obviously, for a lot of us, the luxury of moving to China or to living in there, fascinating as that would be, and I'd love to do that. And my wife is very much focused on London in terms of her work as a musician. But if I weren't, I'd be very much up for that. But a lot of us aren't going to be in position to do that. How can we access that kind of thing outside China, if at all?
I think even going to China would just be a lose-lose scenario because you speak English, you don't speak Chinese, you're clearly a noob and they can take advantage of you. I looked at Chinese sourcing agents. I hired a couple through, it was Odesk. I think it was Upwork. They changed the name. They have fun with that stuff. So I hired a couple of them knowing that it probably wouldn't work out with all of them, but I wanted to find one that was really good. I ended up finding Cardi was the name she chose in English. Obviously, that's not a real name, but she was just a kick-ass sourcing agent. She did an incredible job. I ended up partnering later on or selling the business later on to someone who was deeply involved in a large trade company in China. And he pointed out that the prices we were getting were even better than the prices he could get in a lot of instances. And it was just because she was a kick-ass negotiator. She knew the people. She knew how to hit the market. And that's something that you'll never be able to do as a foreigner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I keep coming across examples more and more now. Even people relatively early in the game will go to somebody like freelance.com. Oh, sorry, I suppose freeup.com is probably the obvious place they tend to start, but Upwork is another possibility. And they'll get a sourcing agent who will just, negotiate in Mandarin or for that matter, Cantonese. They'll be able to read the prices on whatever that site is, 1656 or whatever it is that the Chinese guys can source on. So in other words, you're much more likely to get a good price from the start. And did have somebody who's just fairly in the very early days say that they just double checked their prices and actually found they were getting a pretty decent price. But even that is worth the reassurance, right? Because otherwise you just don't know if you're getting taken for a ride, really.
I did it all in Alibaba for the first 5 or 6 products, but just after that, it was just so much more helpful. She would also coordinate a lot of the shipping and logistics as well. And it just made things much simpler.
Okay, so you're mentioning numbers of products. So you said Alibaba, the first 5 or 6 products. So give us a sort of timeline of your business growth. So you started off with your first product, which went really well. Obviously, were you just sourcing on Alibaba for the first one then, and you weren't in China itself?
I was in China, but I was sourcing off of Alibaba. It was beautiful because I would get samples like the next day, and it was free shipping.
Oh wow! Okay, so you were in China, so you had that.
I got as many samples as I could from different related products while I was there, just because it made things much easier.
Yeah.
It progressed pretty quickly. I set the goal on the podcast of, I called it step 1 to 7 figures. That was like our tagline. It was a joke. And within a year, I wanted to sell the business for 7 figures. I ended up hitting that. It's on the earn out now, but it's gone pretty well. I scaled up very, very quickly. We were launching products as fast as you could physically launch products in terms of turning cash.
I was going to say, so tell us a bit more about, so the first sort of 4 or 5 products you said, or 5 or 6 you sourced on Alibaba, even though you were in China. So you just got stuff really, really fast in terms of samples, and presumably back and forth was very quick. So you kicked in with the sourcing agent of what, about 5 or 6 SKUs in?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
I don't remember at this point. But
no, it's all right. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to hold you. It's not going to be a grand jury about it. I'm just trying to get a sense of that. Okay, so from that point on, what was your strategy? So you had a sourcing agent around then. They're sourcing in China from you. Are you sourcing just private label products at that point, or were there some sort of unique takes on it, or sort of semi-unique, or what was the sort of that side of things?
I feel like most people in the Amazon game that talk about unique and semi-unique and value add are all full of shit. Adding together 2 products that are just a product has nothing special inherently valuable about it. I would say for a couple of things, we would look at problems that we had with the products once we had issues, and then get the suppliers to fix those issues. And that would be like the extent of the differentiation, so to speak. I don't know if that's a sustainable model long term. I think you do need to have designed different products, but I really think for that it needs to be not just like some little tweak, like we made a hinge better, or we did. I mean, let's face it, that's just nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
Too many people praise that as like the end all be all.
Yeah. So what's your take on that? I mean, why is that not a good thing?
It's marginally better at best. You need to be 5 to 10x better in terms of getting people to switch. Now on Amazon, it's slightly different. You just need to be ranking higher than them in order to get the sale. But to be able to generate that type of momentum, if you're making things that are marginally better, there's a reason why we have a generic mousetrap. And it's not because you can't make a better one. It's because it's really not all that different or better or worth the extra costs.
Good. Yeah, it's a very good point. And thank you for bringing that up, because, I mean, it feels like there's a bit of a move that way. And certainly a lot of people are advising about getting unique products up. But yeah, there's obviously 2 extra costs, I guess. And do speak more on this, because obviously you've looked into this and made very clear-minded decisions about it. Number one is the extra lead time that you've got, which means the market gets ahead of you, and which can be quite a few months if you're doing unique stuff. And the other one is obviously the extra cost, which needs to be outweighed by the extra selling price you can get and profit over quite a considerable time. So what are your thoughts on that? You just think it's mostly a losing game?
I think sourcing or doing similar products to other people at this point is a completely losing game.
Okay.
If you're not willing to create new product, and also Amazon is a channel, it's not a business. That's the biggest problem I always had with people is, and it's a problem I had as well. Amazon was the majority of our business, but you can lose it in a day. You really need to focus on building up other proprietary channels, because Amazon's ramping up their Amazon Basics program as well. And obviously it takes longer and longer, but they just use third-party sellers to get the data so that they can figure out what sells, and then they negotiate better prices. So if you're not building defensibility into your business, like you can look at how certain businesses have been really successful, like a Stitch Fix with a subscription type model, where you've got Warby Parker with disrupting the supply chain and making things significantly cheaper. You need to look at different ways that you can differentiate the entire business, and branding can be the differentiation, but not if it's an Amazon brand, because then no one really cares. It has to be a brand where people are going to your website.
Okay, that makes sense. And actually, yeah, if you don't know the brand. So tell us about that. Seems to run almost a bit contrary, if I understand, to your approach with Amazon, which is when you just scaled super fast and your idea was, 7 figures in 12 months, more or less, and you've sold the brand. So was that purely an Amazon-based brand, and was that just a pure sort of short-term play, or how do those two sort of things coexist?
It was a short-term play. It wasn't something I was passionate about. We did expand. We were also on eBay. We were on Walmart. We were on Shopify. We tried everything. For a while, things went pretty well with some of the other channels, but it never got above 15% of our sales. Yeah. And I mean, that was completely an arbitrage play. That was let's sell shit. Let's make some money so that we can go do something that actually matters.
Okay. So an arbitrage place between the cost of goods on Alibaba and the cost they were selling for on Amazon, pretty much that.
Yeah, and then the ability to outrank other listings on Amazon. I would say that model also, keep in mind, is several years old at this point. I don't think it's applicable today, unless you have a lot of money.
Okay, so the arbitrage play is not applicable today. So what is the alternative model that you think is still applicable today, using Amazon as the main sales channel, at least to start with?
Basically, you have to keep in mind that you need to be building an off Amazon sales channel. If you're willing to break the rules, the number one important point is to get the email address and then to get them off of Amazon as quickly as possible. So I would be, unless you have a large Amazon business, I would be breaking the rules. I would be doing anything I could in terms of inserting things into listings, even potentially direct mail to their houses, just to try to get them to your site as opposed to Amazon, because you have to steal Amazon's customers. They're not your customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So inserts and direct mail. I mean, I guess we've all tended to be doing that from day one for a lot of us, but not necessarily taking that as the main thing was an extra bonus. So, yeah. And direct mail is not a common thing. Is that something you actually did? You send postcards?
That's not something I did, but that's something I saw some people doing and I thought was absolutely brilliant.
I know
there's APIs you can use.
Yeah, I know that Ben Cummings did quite a bit of that stuff, and with certain products was finding success. I mean, I don't know whether it was just a kind of flavor of the month type tactic, or whether it was really a kind of deep part of the business model. I mean, do you come across any examples of that really working very well?
How many emails do you get a month?
Yeah, goodness knows.
How many letters do you get a month?
Yeah, not many.
Yeah, if the letter says coupon and it's the company you just bought something from, you're probably going to open it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so the open rates at the very least are going to be much better than emails, right? Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I guess that the thing about direct mail is it's going to cost rather more money. So I suppose you might want to test it in some other form, like Facebook ads or Google ads or something first, before you then nail down the copy or something like that. At least that's the traditional wisdom. Any thoughts on that?
I don't think you could necessarily test it, because it would be a completely different medium. You would be... I mean, if people click on a Facebook ad, it's not like you're going to print a picture of a pretty girl and put that on the envelope to get them to open. But with a Facebook ads, you want people on there, traditionally of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it would be fundamentally different. But the reason why it could be effective is because it's no longer popular or done very much. So it would, again, be a reverse arbitrage.
Okay. So when you say reverse arbitrage, can you just elaborate for those of us who aren't fluent in words like arbitrage in the broader sense outside of retail arbitrage?
So basically 20, 30, 40 years ago, you got a bajillion catalogs in the mail and they were all trying to sell you crap. And somehow they even got you to subscribe to buy these things. Then we started to get into the internet age. People started buying things more and more online. Direct mail died. The only things you were sending letter for were friends, and pretty much all of that just became email. So you went from getting tons of mail to getting almost no mail. During that time, the price of digital advertising went up, while the price of print advertising went down when it comes to direct mail. So you're just kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. You can't advertise on Facebook and make money unless you're really good at it, because 1 billion people are doing it, including Putin. So if you really want to make some money, you have to do what other people aren't doing. And that's the one thing that'll stand out anyways, because no one's doing it.
Okay, so it's basically a double sort of win, which is number one, you stand out, and number two, it's cheaper. So I guess that makes a lot of sense. I mean, not something I've come across yet. I mean, I know that somebody in one of the 10K collectors was actually considering, I think actually ran some ads in a major magazine. I think it was Condé Nast magazine or something. And again, for the right brand fit, I think that at least the cost per sort of eyeball, if you like, if that doesn't sound very elegant, but was pretty low compared to any form of digital media. So I guess that's another example of an offline player and good value stuff that's been overlooked by the rest of the market.
Essentially, do what other FBA sellers aren't doing, because otherwise you're not going to make money. There's too many of them.
That makes a lot of sense. So tell us a bit more about the whole brand story then. So you built this, so we went to 5-6 SKUs using Alibaba, even though you're living in China. So obviously that is a bit of an X factor. And I think it's important to acknowledge, if you like, the hidden factors and why did you succeed. And one of the reasons, we talked about the engineering degree, we talked about the copywriting background, but really it sounds like also being in China was very significant. Then you scaled up with your sourcing agent. How many SKUs did you end up with, SKUs as in product lines for those who are new to the game, before you ended up selling the business, and tell us a bit more about how you got towards that selling point.
So I was in China for 6 weeks. After that, I bounced back to Thailand and Vietnam for a while, and then moved to Colombia, South America.
Wow.
Ultimately met my wife there, actually. In terms of number of SKUs that we got to, Jesus, we launched in Europe as well. I will say that went really well for a while, and then just kind of became terrible. We didn't focus enough on it. We didn't have great translations. And now it's just been a complete hassle with VAT and having to pay those fun VAT services. And it's basically all just bullshit fees for no reason for government stuff. So that has been a pain in the butt. I'm not really involved anymore, but how many SKUs do we get up to? I would say different products was probably 12 by the time we sold, not SKUs. SKUs would be even higher. Yeah. 15 or 18. And then after selling we injected a bunch more money into the business to grow and scale it up. So then those numbers went way, way up.
Okay. So that's interesting. Let me just pick up on that. So you said after you sold it, you injected a bunch of money. I mean, so who sold what to whom and who funded it?
So I sold the business, and my business, the guy who bought the business, injected more capital into it to be able to launch more products and scale faster.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about I say a little bit. Please tell us the whole story. Let's start with what happened. So you built the business, you got up to 12 product lines, and yes, SKUs is a bit of almost a less clear term than product lines, right? Because it's a bit clearer. What is it? The main spread of stuff. What are the lines you got in the water in terms of keyword niches, etc. So you got to 12 product lines, and then you obviously had the idea of scaling it to sell it quickly from the very beginning. Did that sort of more or less go according to your plan? And what was that plan?
Yeah, I would say it more or less went according to plan. The guy who bought the business ultimately found it through FBA All-Stars, and that helped with selling the business. We met in Switzerland, where I was living at the time. My wife's Swiss. And yeah, we went over the details and then kind of put together the sales package. It was a basic earn-out type thing. So some of it's been completed, not all of it. Okay,
so tell us a bit about the earn-out thing. How does that work in simple terms?
Basically, it was meant to be upfront cash plus 2, possibly 3-year earn-out. We've extended a little bit to make it longer so that there's more money that stays in the business. For me, it's not a huge problem as long as money's coming out to me and I know that I'm going to get it. So I've been flexible with that. The business hasn't been as powerful as it was initially, a couple of product challenges, etc., but it's still doing pretty well.
Okay, so how does an earn-out work for those of us who haven't sold a business before or not familiar with that terminology?
Basically, everyone's kind of trying to look out for themselves, but also not screw the other guy. So how an earn-out works is, I want you to give me straight cash. You want to pay nothing until you've made the money back. An earn-out is a split between that. So you get some upfront cash, and then the earn-out being some type of split between the revenue for the business and then for the actual person who got bought out. So let's say you sold something for $1 and you're going to pay out the earn-out over the course of a year. You would get a $0.1 every month, or you're going to pay it out over 5 years. You would get a $0.5 every year. Does that kind of make sense?
I think so. So just to reflect back, because somebody who's not, I've not sold an Amazon business, although I've obviously talked to people who have. I know quite a few people I know have done, not as swiftly as you, I think, but have sold businesses for, I think a couple of friends of mine have sold them for like $100,000, $200,000, that sort of thing. So not massive.
Still
but
awesome.
yeah, it's still fantastic. Yeah, still put extensions on their houses and what have you. I mean, they're pretty happy about it. So what was I going to say? Yeah. So basically, if I understand, something like the amount of money you get ends up being whatever you're going to get for the business. Say, when we can talk about the money in a second, but let's say you're going to end up with 500,000 at the end of it. You would end up with, you get 100,000 in the first year, and then you'd earn it back as the business earns money. You would be paid the money for the value of the business over the course of, say, 3, 4, 5 years, until you've been given all the money that you were due, and then you're out of the game and the owner has to deal with the business on their own. Is that roughly how it works?
It was either a year or 18 months in terms of the transition. So I was managing CEO for all that time, and then training up the team, and also training him up to lead the team. So we finalized the transition, but yeah, that's how it works. I'm not really involved, other than still getting some emails from things, having to help with accounting and all of the bookkeeping and legal shit. That's a pain in the butt. And basically getting all of that. I hope it's okay to swear on here. I can't.
That's fine. Yeah, we tend to do it now.
You're British. It's okay.
Is that right? Americans really squeamish about swearing. Actually, I've noticed that the Americans, it's an odd thing. Every culture has its dividing lines. Like running around touting a gun in Britain is generally seen as very poor behavior, but swearing is fine. Whereas in America, it seems the opposite. You can show guns as much as you like in a movie, but if you swear, then suddenly it's an 18 certificate. It's horses for courses, I guess. But anyway, I'm exaggerating grossly here. But there are some entertaining similarities and differences between British and American culture. But yeah, we're quite a sweary lot over here. So yeah, so that sounds interesting. So basically, how much flexibility do you have these days with a sellout? Because I guess the idea that people have of selling businesses is that, you work really, really hard, you build this business, you find a buyer, you negotiate really hard, and then you sell it and you walk away. Now, you've already implied that's not really how it tends to work. Is that a typical thing, this earn-out scenario, and 18 months, is that a sort of typical number, or what's your experience of that?
So it's like if you have kids and then they graduate to college. The question is, do you kick them out of the house, or do you try to support them, teach them what they need to do to learn to survive? So essentially, any type of, or the majority of business sales, you need to teach the person coming in how to survive, how to run the business. It depends on how dependent the business is on you versus just being completely self-sustaining. Some people are really good and are able to build up a business where they don't matter. To be honest, that's very few people. We're not good at that, especially when you're building a smaller business. So you're going to have to train up the person or the business that's bought you out to be able to run the business and not screw it all up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Usually it's a couple months minimum.
Okay, yeah, and that makes, 2 months seems like a very, very short time to learn to deal with the whys and wherefores of the whole business. And also, interesting that what you say with a really small business, it's unlikely to be self-sustaining, because I was talking with somebody the other day, he was considering joining the 10K Collective, not sure whether he's going to join or not, but he's got 7 million euros of turnover, and he's just put a CEO in place. I mean, in that case, if we wanted to sell that lock, stock and barrel to somebody, basically it's more or less a self-sustaining entity. Having said that, at that level, if something goes wrong, it's pretty major and it probably needs an expert to fix, right? But it's a very good reality check of what you're just saying, actually. So what would you say are the, let's say 3 as an arbitrary number, the 3 big lessons you've learned from building and selling an Amazon business?
3.
I mean, that's a rather massive question.
Yeah. The first is just a general life lesson. There are no rules. It doesn't matter what people tell you. It doesn't matter what they say or how you should do something. You can pretty much do things however the hell you want, figure it out, and oftentimes find a better way of doing something. I would say that's the first rule. The second rule would be build solid systems from day one. They don't have to be airtight in terms of, I need to get all this set up and I'm really worried about this and we have all of these different softwares and I need to make sure yada, yada, yada. Because then you're just over optimizing and you're really just procrastinating doing the stuff that actually matters. But have a decent system, have a way you name your folders, have a way that you generally have everything laid out so that it's really simple and easy to hire people and then to sell the business if you want to. And the third thing I would say is know what your goal for the business is. My goal was to build it and sell it quickly so I had some money so that I could do other things. But if you don't know what that goal is, you don't know what you're building towards. So if you want to sell the business, you have to have all those systems. You need to have your numbers. You need to be building yourself out of the business. You need to reach a certain scale probably. if you're building something, and don't trap yourself. That's number 4. Don't build a job unless that's what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I think don't build a job. I think that is probably for me, even at the early days. I mean, there's some really great things here, actually, but let's examine them. Just, to spend hours on them. But I think I just want to kick those around a bit. Don't trap yourself and don't build a job. I would say is really important from pretty early on, because people get this idea of the fantasy of passive income. It's not going to be that passive, but if you make yourself the center of all decisions, it's going to be really, really unpassive, and you've just got an extremely unstable job dependent on somebody else, i.e. Amazon. So I really cannot endorse that too strongly. I'd say that as somebody who manages to fail on that test a lot of the time, and eventually when the pain gets too high, I start outsourcing stuff and I wonder why I hadn't done it ages before. So that's my take on that. Any thoughts on that, first of all?
I would say passive income doesn't come from a business, because there's always shit that can happen. Passive income is once you sell the business and then invest it in something that's super sure.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
The people that tell you otherwise are selling the life of a passive income.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, we all have our obligatory shot. If you run a podcast for Amazon, I kind of had an ironic shot done at a pool. I couldn't face going down to the beach with my laptop because I didn't want to get sand in it. But yeah, this is a complete and utter myth that I want. Yes, I'm glad to hear you say that. And also, why do you need to do that? There are famously solid, time-tested passive income vehicles like property. I own a little property and I hardly spend any management time on it. Somebody else manages it for me. It's not incredibly profitable, but it's cash flow positive, for I would say, 20 months out of 24. So it does very nicely in that term. So yeah, there's no need to reinvent the wheel on that. So amen to that, as they say. Now, the other things you said, really like them. There are no rules. I mean, in a way, by asking about this, the dangers we make the new set of there are no rules, and then you create your book on that and your system and make millions while other people just follow a new set of rules, right? But I mean, tell us a bit more about that.
I mean, everyone has wants for you. Everyone has demands. Society has a system. You go to college, you get a house, you get a nice white fence, you get married, you have kids, you get a puppy. Everyone's kind of telling you what to do, and they're all full of shit. You need to decide what you want and do that. I moved to Thailand and then to Vietnam and around because I knew what I had seen is not what I wanted. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to build businesses. I wanted to explore and do other things. But that's not even necessarily the right thing. I just realized that everyone I talked to was like, are you sure? You just went to a great school and got a great education. And people are going to tell you things, and they're going to try to tell you how to live their life, which they're probably speaking not very happy about. So you kind of have to just say, ignore everyone else unless they're further along in life on a path that you want to be on. Otherwise, the advice just sucks.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, a lot of the time there's that thing, I suppose it's the metaphor of the crabs reaching up to grab the other crabs back into the bucket, right? They're trying to pull you down to their level so they don't feel so bad. The fact that they go into a job that they find mediocre and really kind of grinding it out and kind of drinking at weekends and then go away for 3-day holidays and what have you, and hoping to, use that as a crutch. It's funny, actually, what you're saying, it resonates a bit with what Chris Rawlings, said quite similar things, who has I think more of a physics degree than an engineering degree, but again, very numerate, and went off to travel around, I think it was New Zealand, on a bike and did the digital nomad thing. The only thing I'd add to that is to people who get obsessed with the digital nomad thing, I'm like, you don't have to do that either, guys. I mean, sometimes, from what I understand from some of my guests, that is not always highly convenient. And a lot of them end up back in a more stable situation once they've explored that. But, they feel free to do it. So, yeah, living other people's dreams. I'm really, really glad you brought that up, because I think it's incredibly prevalent. And actually, I think it's prevalent to live other people's internet fantasy dreams just as much, right? Laptop on the beach. So thank you very much for that. The other one, having a clear goal, I mean, in a way, that's kind of obvious, but tell us a bit more about that.
No one has a clear goal. Everyone wants to build a business and be successful. And tell me where the end of that is. The end is never. Are you going for 1 million, 100 million, 1 billion, 10 million, 10 billion? Do you need to beat out Bezos? It's a never-ending cycle that you can't get out of. If you don't have some type of goal of what you're aiming for, if it's passive income, if it's not having to work, if it's being worth $10 million, you need to know what you're shooting towards, because otherwise you're like a horse with blinders running, but you're not actually sure where you're headed. and you might not like it when you get there.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm ashamed to say that's something I'm absolutely been guilty of.
Everyone does it. You just have to
Yeah.
reevaluate from time to
Yeah.
time and see if you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you change something.
And what I can say is somebody who's obviously a lot less smart and goal-driven, or all the qualities that you obviously clearly possess, even the way you talk about this stuff, and never mind the actual physical record of creating and selling a big business in a really short time frame. I have to say that for some of us, we have to get smacked by life a few times and run our head into the brick wall of creating a job for ourselves, which is unstable and unpleasant in some cases, or just simply blindly running around doing stuff until you finally wake up. The pain is enough for you to go, yeah, you know what, you got to change this, get a goal or get out. And I think, I reached that a while ago. I'm still kind of reaching that. But again, whether you come at it because you're smart enough to be Matt Ward or whether you're dumb enough to be Mike Easy, I think you've got to kind of get to the point where you go, thrashing around blindly is a really crap idea. And if you're not used to setting really big goals, maybe because you've been trying to conform to something else, from my experience, that can take a while to get to the point. I mean, did you find that you came straight out of the gate with this big goal, or did you kind of grow towards that?
What big goal? I have no idea where I'm going.
Well, the big business. Well, let's say for the Amazon business, the big goal. Well, for me, a big goal of selling a business within 12 months of doing 7 figures.
I made it up for a podcast, and I thought it would be ambitious and get people excited, and then I decided I had to do it.
I love that. You know what? I really love that for so many reasons. But one of the reasons is because once you make a commitment to something, you have to follow through because you've said it. And that forces you to be on your game. And also what I have to say as well is that in terms of internal leadership, I mean, if you're going to run a company, you say, okay, we're going to do X in Y time. That's a super, super clear target, right? Whether you hit it or not, at least you've got a super clear aim and you can measure whether you're getting there or not. Yeah.
If you shoot for the moon and you fall short, you're still in space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I can't really top that. So I think that's a fantastic way to end this episode all about you building your Amazon business, and very, very inspiring and exciting story it is as well. So Matt, we'll leave it there and we'll come back onto your next episode, which is all going to be about funding for really ambitious growth, which goes together hand in hand with your ambitious growth yourself as an Amazon seller and business builder. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing all about your Amazon business story.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Cash flow is a bitch. I was never good at the finance stuff, but yeah, basically we're funding the businesses that VCs won't touch, and Amazon might give you tiny little loans, but then they want to take your house if you fail. So we're
basically it is. Yeah,
we're trying to fix that.
Great. Well, we'll talk about that next episode. So folks, if you want to hear more about that, if you're an ambitious Amazon seller and just cannot get your hands on enough cash to feed the beast, stay tuned to the next episode and we will talk all about that.
Cash without personal guarantees or anything, completely non-dilutive. Look forward to chit-chatting.